Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, November 21st, 2025. This week's Chairman's Report is guest written by Jade Walle, a practicing CPA who's on the Americans for Fair Taxation Board of Directors. The FAIRtax, keeping your entire paycheck. A June 2025 nationwide survey commissioned by the National Tax Research Committee and conducted by Quantus Insights yielded some quite interesting results. It found that of the 1,200 registered voters who were polled, 59% of them found that keeping their entire paycheck was the most appealing feature of the FAIRtax. Now, frankly, I expected there to be other aspects of the FAIRtax that would resonate with people at even a greater level. What about the simplicity and freedom? In other words, no more income tax returns, ever. What about eliminating the IRS or drastically reducing runaway illegal evasion? Well, of course, the sentiment of American citizens can change over time, especially as they learn about the FAIRtax and how it works relative to our outdated and cumbersome income payroll tax system. However, for now, let's examine this interesting polling result because it's extremely important. Now, I believe I know at least part of the reason why keeping your entire paycheck bubbled to the top of the list of perceived FAIRtax benefits. For the past 2 years, my daughter has worked for a paycheck while home from college for the summer. Now, although we had the conversation several years ago on how withholdings work and their purpose, the idea of the government taking a big chunk of her money before she even gets it has never really sat well with her. If she just sees her direct deposit in her bank account, she's fine. However, when I walk through all the components on her pay stub with her, she begins to get frustrated with all the withholdings. When I explain how she'll likely never recover the nearly 10% of her gross pay that's confiscated in the name of FICA withholdings, she becomes even angrier. This psychological phenomenon is germane to the human condition, and great intellects, far beyond my meager comprehension, figured this out centuries ago. Adam Smith, author of The Wealth of Nations in 1776, surmised that anything of value that we can acquire in this life comes from our hard work. This concept means that from our toil and sweat, if we work hard, save, remain diligent, frugal, and avoid wasteful spending, we may be able to have or build something that we can call our own. The incredible thing about America is that this was a radical new concept in 1776, since for 99% of the world's history and for 99% of the world's population, owning property was something people never even dreamed of or even thought was possible. Now, I believe our founders realized this, at least to a certain extent, and that's why direct taxation was expressly forbidden in the original Constitution, and why it took until 1913 for a permanent income tax to be implemented. Now, the psychological reality is that humans feel as if we're being stolen from when the fruit of our labor, our income, is taken away from us. It's like an amputation of sorts. For the vast majority of us, our income is the only way we have to achieve our dreams of owning property of any kind. Now, another psychological reality is that when we consume beyond our life's basic necessities, taxation on spending beyond what we need to live is not perceived in the same light. We inherently understand that we have a choice when spending beyond our basic needs, and therefore taxation on excessive consumption, as opposed to our income, is received immeasurably better. My daughter agrees. She works hard for what she considers to be not the best hourly rate, and she simply wants to get everything she's worked for. She wants choice, she explained to me. She doesn't mind paying a consumption tax on frivolous expenditures because she can elect how much and when she would pay any such tax. Now, given her taste in Lululemon fashion, I'm afraid she may be adequately contributing to our nation's treasury for a good while to come. She sees withholding from her paycheck for what it is, the government forcibly taking a portion of her earnings away from her every 2-week pay period. She has no control over how much they take, and as I said earlier, that just doesn't sit well with her. The psychological feeling that we're being stolen from is a driving force behind the rampant evasion of the income tax. People feel justified in cheating on their income tax because it feels like they're thwarting a thief. Now, there's no such phenomenon with a fair tax. That's why studies have indicated that the fair tax would reduce illegal evasion by over 90%. The reason is clear. The fair tax gives us a choice and the freedom to live our own life apart from the government confiscating a significant portion of the fruits of our labor. My daughter's right. And now I understand at least a little more why the majority of Americans in this recent poll believe that keeping their entire paycheck is the fair tax's best trait. In conclusion, Jade's article addressed the fact that if you want a simple and fair method of collecting federal taxes that allows you to keep your whole paycheck, there's only one choice, the fair tax. Now, you may ask why we don't scrap the income payroll tax system and replace it with a fair tax that allows us to keep our whole paycheck, and we decide how much tax we pay by what we purchase. Well, the simple answer is the elites and members of Congress benefit from the present income payroll tax system. Now, many of you have labored tirelessly for freedom from the federal income tax and the IRS. You deserve a great deal of credit for your efforts to educate the American people on the need to fund the American government in a way that's good for America and that returns freedom to the American people. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax and the IRS with an alternative system that can still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax and the IRS is with the fair tax. Now, make no mistake about it. The fair tax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the fair tax will be fierce and unrelenting, and don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempt to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can finally eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Now, of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well so that no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the elites in D.C. This will take the diligent efforts from all of us. We need your financial assistance, and we need your grassroots assistance. Now, if you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the fair tax to President Trump, please let us know. Also, please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representative and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution: pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system and the IRS along with it? Help bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing, or actually investing, $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to FAIRtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.